Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longery. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you from the Valley Access Studios out of Stillwater. Now, Off the Record News has been cable cast on public access channels for nearly 15 years. That's a long time. And every week we cover a different topic. Now today we are going to be talking about the latest updates from the city of Grant. And this has been a running series where once a month we have Councilmember Loren Sederstrom from the city of Grant here on the program talking about highlights of what is going on in his city. And certainly if there are other city council members out there who would like to give updates from their city and that would like to highlight what's going on in their communities, certainly give me a call and we'll get you on here, and you too can have an opportunity to talk about what's going on in your community. After all, that's what public access is all about. It's about community engagement. So with that, welcome Mr. Sederstrom for being here on the program today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's nice that I continue the tradition of all around Grant, even though SCC is closed, and bring you these up-to-date things. And we have quite a hubbub out in Grant. I think we covered this last time. We talked about hydrovac dumping. And I didn't have a picture of hydrovac dumping, so that's what we're going to start with today. An actual flyer that was put in the paper to aware citizens of exactly what was going on, because an individual filed for a grading permit and he said he was going to do something, and when in fact he was dumping 400 to 500 hydrovac trucks from a company he owned in town. So if we could show the first picture. There we go. There is the first picture I took of the hydrovac dumping, and you can see the slurry coming out of the back. And what they do, that they have a combination of a pressure washer and a wet dry vac, obviously industrial sized, and they put that on the back of a semi-truck. So for example, if there's a sewer break, they cut a hole in the asphalt, chisel one out, then they make a slurry with the pressure washer, then they suck it up with the vacuum. That way they don't have to worry about breaking any other utilities that are down there with a backhoe. So, and nothing's wrong with that. But the other problem with that is hydrovacs are also used for industrial spills, like taking the dirt up from a gas station, or if there's an oil spill somewhere, or a chemical truck dumps over, they will bring a hydrovac truck in because that will, suck it all up. But the
it's
problem,
sort of, in some ways, sort of like a wet dry vac.
It is. That's what it is. That's what it is. And so
let's take a look at the flyer again, and we'll scroll up so that our viewers can see the rest of the flyer and see. And you mentioned that this was in the newspaper.
Keep scrolling.
Correct? And continue to scroll. There we go.
There we go.
And so this was then a flyer, an insert in the local paper, correct?
Correct. That's so the residents would be aware of it. Because a lot of people don't even know what a hydrovac is. It's a relatively new technology. It's only been around 5 to 7 years. And more cities are going to the use because it's so unobtrusive. You can get in and fix the repair of a pipe without breaking the gas line or the water line. You can fix the sewer line or whichever line breaks. So it's proved to be a very excellent technique.
Right. And I think the main concern that you have and many of the residents of Grant have is this question about what is in that slurry that they're sucking up at some other unknown location. Because at this point, that's from the discussions that were at the council meeting that we covered last program, the question is that there isn't a manifest that says, the city doesn't require a manifest that says where is the material coming from? What type of material is it that is being dumped? So it could indeed be non-toxic, just material dirt that's mixed with water. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, it's also used in other types of cleanup, and that's really what a lot of that concern is that what is in that material?
Well, the mayor contends it's just a different delivery method. And well, what's the matter if it comes in a dump truck or a hydrovac? Well, you just hit the nail on the head. It is used for cleanups in addition to regular construction. So if 90% of it is just clean fill, there's the other 10% that can contaminate the water table. And there's 140,000 residents in South Washington County that have their water contaminated that they can't drink well water.
Right. And not from hydrovacs, to be clear, but because of other contamination. But that's where the concern arises, because that was from industrial commercial dumping of a different type, and that caused contamination of their water table.
Well, my hayfield is right across the street from this hydrovac dumping station, and it wasn't applied as such. The guy said he was going to do landscaping, didn't fill the grading permit out, and we showed last time that the engineer fell down, and the building inspector fell down. They didn't observe it, they didn't look at it, but
yeah, he fell down in his duties.
In his duties, yes.
Not that he fell down in the field, of course, but that he fell down in his duties. And again, that's part of the reason why you have inspections, why you have regulations, is to ensure that the public safety and public interest is preserved.
Why, and that's the debate has been, the mayor insists that we only need one manifest from if we put something new, because it all comes in the same. But what he doesn't understand, what if you only have half a hydrovac truck? You're cleaning a little water spill or something, and then you go to another area that isn't. Well, you know, there's, how do you divide the hydrovac trucks that are clean from the ones that are dirty? Mm-hmm. It isn't like a milk truck that only hauls milk and you can't haul gasoline on the weekend. I mean, there's no way of monitoring this. So I'm saying that we need to have a special ordinance covering hydrovac trucks exclusively. But let's go on. We're going to talk about something else. One of the things I wanted to show here is we had, I don't know if you can see that, but you can, this is a cease and desist order from Eckberg Lammers, and they had issued that September 26, 2017. Well, interestingly enough, within 1 week, they were dumping hydrovacs. And here is a copy, I suppose you can't see it terribly well, of the police report where they are dumping hydrovacs at 6:30 in the morning. Now our ordinance says,
even though there was a cease and desist
even though there was
order,
a cease and desist, and we're only allowed to do construction between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Now they also had a convoy of 6 trucks on a Saturday night from at 8:30 from 3M, where the 260 building, they had the chemical research building, they had taken some stuff from. So there's some problems here. Then the MPCA came out and gave them a permit. They said on Monday, we're going to test it on Wednesday. And like I said before, that's kind of like if you get a DUI on Saturday night, the sheriff isn't going to tell you to come in Monday, you're tested now. But they had brought 3 or 4 dump trucks of stuff in there, and they'd worked a lot of stuff around. So I don't think the testing was valid, but that's...
Now, have you heard what the results are of that testing that was done?
Yes, I did hear the results. It's within residential levels. Well, yeah, but you take a bad batch of hydrovacs and mix it with some clean stuff, certainly it's going to come out to be residential levels. If you have 1 toxic load and 10 non-toxic loads, by the time you move it around, in the next video that you see, we did a follow-up video on what was going on, and you will see from the size of the equipment what they had and what they did. So if we could play
Number 5.
This is the hydrovac site. As we can see, we have front end loaders. We have track hose. We also have dozers out here. We can see pieces of equipment out there. I think here we can see what looks like to maybe be a Suburban over there. Also doing work, gentlemen out there working. So this is some of the digging that's currently being done in this pond. As you can see, this is a commercial operation. It's not residential in nature at all. So from there on, you can see what's going on.
You could see the gray, filthy looking soil that came out of there. It just shouldn't be happening. Mm-hmm. We should have special permits for it.
Well, and I think the concern, of course, is valid, because if indeed that what has been dumped so far is clean, well, that's great. because then there's not contamination that has to be contended with. But what you're trying to do is prevent in the future that there would be contamination, that there would be dirty fill, that there would be material that's dumped that would impact the groundwater. And considering the fact that the city of Grant, everybody has a well and is dependent upon the groundwater, it's an important issue.
Well, the last time we had shown the grading permit the man didn't fill out, he basically lied. He didn't say I'm dumping hydrovacs. He said he was going to make a pit, a pond for animals and get some rocks for landscaping. Blatant lie. He said he was going to do 80 cubic yards. He has brought in between 5,000 and 7,000 yards of hydrovac materials, in addition to 4 semi-loads of 3-inch minus limestone for the parking pad so the trucks wouldn't sink out of sight. So he's done extensive dumping. He's raised the area 3 to 4 feet in places. And of course, he was supposed to have it remediated. They gave him an extension, a 14-day extension from his permit was supposed to stop on October 31st. They gave him a 14-day extension. And he was dumping hydrovacs. On the 14th, I saw 5 hydrovac trucks come in and dump. And there's still mounds and mounds of dirt between 5,000 and 7,000 yards. He's got a mini mountain range.
Now, since the last program, has that grading permit been amended to reflect the actual work that's being done on the property?
Not really. They just gave him an extension to finish his grading. And what we're going to show at the next video clip, it became a topic of conversation at the city council meeting.
Unregulated fill requirement in the case that somebody would be importing any material. And I think the biggest change that we're recommending is it's based on the fees that we're charging currently. We were charging a base fee up to 5,000 cubic yards, and we're recommending changing that to 1,000 cubic yards before the additional threshold would kick in. Just a little bit of research that I did. Most of the cities in the metropolitan area use a threshold of 1,000 cubic yards before they consider any activities, commercial activity or something that's above and beyond, say, a basement or a structure excavation. So again, just some background information. I think from what I've read, the original permit application was adopted in 2004, and then later changed in 2007, which in the 2007 ordinance requested or requires a conditional use permit if any activities are greater than 5,000 cubic yards. So I guess with that said, I would consider any questions that you might have.
Gentlemen? Larry, go ahead.
Brad, in our grading permit, of course, we have a closing out of a permit. We have escrow fees. We talk about zoning ordinances, but no place have I seen how do you hold a person accountable for violating zoning and permitting applications?
And Brad, I'm going to stop you before you answer that. If that starts to leak into areas that are of more legal, I would appreciate it if you would go ahead and refer those to Mr. Sandstrom instead of taking guesses at that. That process is a completely separate.
Mr. Sederstrom, what was the date of this meeting?
This was the beginning of this month in November.
Okay, so this is rather current, and when they're talking about the grading permit, they're talking about the city's rules and regulations with obtaining a grading permit, correct?
Mm-hmm. What they're trying to do is upgrade it and put some controls in it, because they have nothing that reflects hydrovac dumping. They have nothing which brings in materials. Now, we have a clip later that I show them about waste, and you see it's semantics. They're not calling this waste, they're calling it clean fill. The mayor's saying, well, this is just a method of delivery. Well, yes, it can be, but when you build a house, you don't have hydrovacs come and dump wet, loose stuff around to backfill. Hydrovac is a total separate issue, and they're not recognizing it as such, and they're putting the citizens of Grant's health, safety, and welfare at risk by not regulating it. But it's interesting you'll see the next clip, they talk about attorney action, and this is so loosey-goosey. People were sounding warning signals from August 15th through the end of September, and before they finally did anything. So if we can look at 533, we'll see what the attorney has to say.
It's really a separate issue in my mind from enforcement of zoning code issues, and zoning code issues go through our standard zoning enforcement process, which usually starts with the city clerk administrator notifying the property owner that they're not in compliance, and/or our city building inspector, depending upon, or city engineer, depending upon who's the most appropriate person to deal with a particular issue. And if it gets to a point where those efforts are not sufficient to get the person into compliance with zoning code, then usually my office will step in and commence legal action as necessary.
Okay, Tom, you had a question?
Tell us, who's the city attorney currently?
It's Kevin Sandstrom is from Ekberg Lammers, is currently the city attorney. It used to be Nick Vivian. It's really interesting. They go after horse owners. Like this one lady has 4 horses and 5 acres, and they're threatening her with legal action. They went after another, Larry Lanou, for a conditional use permit, and they spent $40,000 on that because they didn't want to accept an aerial survey from the Washington County. But they get a man that's dumping hydrovacs, 400 to 500, and some of them come from 3M that could be contaminated, and they don't want to do anything. It's just beyond reasonableness. It's just unconscionable, the approach they're taking.
Right, so this issue of enforcement, again, it sounds like there's some kind of a process for enforcement, but who initiates a process for enforcement in the city of Grant? Because as you indicated, there are some things that they are enforcing and other things they're not enforcing. So who's responsible for enforcement?
Well, it depends on the complaint. If a formal complaint is filed, which I'm aware that one has been filed against this area for not only violating a grading permit, after-hours operation, hydrovac dumping in excess of the yardage that was required, but what I've heard, nothing's been done so far. The building inspector, the attorney, the engineer, I don't even think the clerk has made a phone call on this yet. So
the person who has to make that determination, so a complaint is made, so then somebody needs to make a determination if that complaint rises to the level of the next step. So whose lap does that sit in?
Well, I think what happens is they have a dartboard in the back, and the city administrator throws a dart, and whoever's the unlucky person to get hit with the dart, and the board is the one that has to call them.
I see. So obviously it appears that there needs to be a better process to determine who it is, first of all, is the responsible person to look at the complaints and decide if it rises to a level. Then there has to be criteria. And then also it seems to me from our past shows that sometimes the determination of whether a complaint is pursued or not has political overtones to it.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course that should be eliminated. There should not be political overtones whatsoever in the complaint enforcement process.
Well, it's very informal. The mayor will talk to the staff. They have a staff meeting. We're not allowed to go to a staff meeting between the engineer, the planner, the attorney, and the building inspector, and they do not keep notes. So we never know. It's just kind of whatever comes out of the can is what comes out of the can. These things are never discussed in front of the city council. Never makes a decision on who to take legal action against. It is all, the city's run by consultants, and that's why they kiss up to the mayor so much, because they keep getting a check. It's kind of like a Mexican taxi driver on speed, just keep that meter running, boys.
Oh my goodness, it sounds like you do need to get some of your processes more standardized and more objective.
Well, as we saw last time, we asked the engineer if he went out and looked at the site. Well, I didn't go out and measure it. Well, common sense would tell you if it's larger than a football field, it's probably more than an acre and would require an MPCA permit. But the point again, he never even went out and looked. No one went out. Well, until people started screaming, and then they blew it off. The watershed district reissued a permit. I haven't seen that. The first one I saw wasn't even filled out completely. Our grading permit wasn't filled out completely. And one of the the request that I made to modify this grading permit is all those permits have to be viewed by the city engineer and completed, and he has to sign off on all of them before any work can begin. And that's one of the things that's in the works, one of the suggestions. Of course, they always say, oh, that's a very good suggestion, then they don't follow it.
Right, and then of course that suggestion would be a best practices, because
Absolutely.
in many of the cities that I'm aware of, what they have for their procedures, that is exactly what is done.
The next clip we're going to be looking at, I'm going to be showing you a little bit of the double talk that they're talking about. They're talking, oh, materials ordinance. Well, we can't call dumping hydrovac. Well, I'm sorry, you bring sand in a dump truck. That is a whole different ball game than bringing a hydrovac in and dumping, because I would consider hydrovac under the consideration of waste, and I bring that up at the meeting later on with another clip. But let's look at that clip, and we'll talk on the other side.
And I did talk a little bit before at the last meeting, and, well, maybe not the meeting as much, but maybe with some of the staff, about a materials ordinance, rather than just simply a grading permit. So my question would be, if we did have some fill coming into the city in general that we didn't necessarily approve of, but it was clean, it was dirt, and there's nothing wrong with hauling and using dirt, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so my question would be, your question that you asked here is, what is the purpose of the proposed work and/or use, structure, building, excavation site, and other? Explain. Okay, these are great, but I think the question I would have, because this doesn't answer what I was, kind of inferring about a materials permit or a materials ordinance, where we have a right as a city to govern what kind of materials are coming in, because this just doesn't mean that if we don't approve of it, it doesn't mean it can't happen. Is that correct? I mean, if it's dirt?
That's correct. So question number 4 really starts the process of them telling us that they're going to be importing material. So I think when they tell us that they're going to be importing material, then I think it's our responsibility to start asking those questions. Where the material's coming from, put requirements on manifests and things like that,
Right.
versus trying to put it into the.
I see where this is going, and I can see where there is going to be a need for understanding what types of materials are allowed. But when I hear someone say, well, we're just going to have to be responsible to ask that question, now you're leaving it to somebody's discretion who is reviewing a grading permit to say, oh, gee whiz, am I going to ask that question or not? And I would think that would be a better practice to have in place policies and procedures at the very least, but certainly an ordinance would be best, that says exactly what types of materials are permitted, or that there is a reference to what is clean fill. Maybe we need to be more specific about the materials.
I agree with you. We need the manifest. I had suggested that. The other thing that we need to separate is hydrovacing is not bringing in fill. Hydrovacing is disposing of waste.
Yes.
It is not fill, it is waste. And the difference between waste and fill is big difference. We don't know what's in that. It's mud, it's slurry, it's water. Yes, it can be just dirt, but we don't know what's there. If they've done a sewer and they're dumping it, there can be some heavy metals, and Lord knows what people put down city sewers, So what I'm fighting for is to get a hydrovacing ordinance that separates that out and doesn't allow that. If someone wants to bring fill in because they're building a house and they need to build up at the side of their house, like I did, I brought 2,000 yards in, but it was sand from the area. I didn't have hydrovacs come out and dump 2,000 gallons of water and wait for that to float away so the residual sand will fill up against the house.
Right, exactly. Well, and I think it is important to make that distinction.
Most of the procedure is with the hydrovac dumping. They have stations and they put it out like on concrete areas and they let the water drain out of it, then the residuals left, and then they can use it for fill. Well, they're creating a dumping situation, and it's not a fill, and that's the difference. But we're going to talk about the next one is when I go out and put it on the overhead, explaining to them exactly what the dumping ordinance is, 32.245. Oh, if we could play that clip, please. Disposal areas liquid waste, liquid and solid waste. And that's what we're pointing out. We have an ordinance that covers that. It's 32-2.45. That's what hydrovac trucks are. It's disposal area, it's a liquid waste. This could be from sewers, it could be from environmental cleanups, it could be, most of the time, probably 80 or 90% of the time, it's absolutely clean. But there's that 10% that isn't. We have 140,000 people in South Washington County that have polluted water. We don't want that in Grant, and I think we have an ordinance. It needs to be enforced. One of the things we're lacking is enforcement. There were 400 to 500 hydrovac trucks dumping. I know, I live across the street from that. My excavator digging the pond saw 20 trucks go in one day. Saturday night, a convoy of 6.
Question?
Yes.
On the
Why
ground
are we
permit?
not enforcing this? We have an ordinance. Why aren't we enforcing it?
You just said it yourself, Loren, that 90 to 95% of this is probably clean.
90%.
I'm talking, this has been tested. You know it's been tested. As a member of the council, you have knowledge a lot of these people do not have. You know it was tested. You know that there's a definition of waste in our ordinance. You happily did not put it here for these folks to see.
Well, it was in last month's packet.
Yeah.
Yes?
There is a definition of waste. Those trucks can carry clean fill just as well as a dump truck can carry clean fill. You just said
And
it
it isn't
yourself.
clean fill.
You just said it yourself.
brilliance
You
of this
have a
is,
question, sir. You
yeah,
have a
the
question.
brilliance of this is,
Manifest for 3M dumping. at
Saturday night
night.
you get a DUI and the sheriff tells you to come in on Monday for a breathalyzer. They go on Monday and tell them, and I saw them bring clean fill in a dump truck.
yes,
So what
you-
I'm
you
saying
totally-
is, we
yeah,
need
you know
to,
what?
we need to address this, not only in a grading
Well,
permit.
come on back to your seat here and we'll.
See how he twists everything around. I said 80 to 90. He says 90 to 95. He said it's all been tested. One day they went out and tested one location. They did not test from the middle of August till the end of September. They tested once. Out of the 500 truckloads, they've maybe got the equivalent of two or three tested. And that's a standard operation procedure for Mayor Huber. He twists the truth into a pretzel, and it isn't clean fill, it's a slurry. So we have an ordinance, I made the point, you see what type of reaction I get.
Right, right.
Now we talk about, he was talking about changing the hours of operation. And if we play the next clip, the suggestion was made that all the permits should be in place, which was an excellent idea. Could I suggest also that the engineer must sign off that he's seen all the permits before the work proceeds?
That's common sense, yeah.
I mean, that would be logical to me, that we know we have the permits here. The one permit that I saw wasn't even filled out completely.
You don't have to convince me on that. Yep, I will. I'll just take that, yeah, as a great suggestion. Larry, you had something?
Yeah. Brad, actually, I want to thank you for your work on here, because you've done pretty good. It's obviously, some of the people up here don't understand construction. We put our kids on a bus at 6:30 in the morning to start going out there and go to school. Construction starts at 7 o'clock. It's standard in the industry. In fact, we don't work from Monday to Friday. Most construction crews work also on Saturday. So I would like to leave it at 7 to 7 and include working on Saturdays, because it's not often that they're gonna need, but if there's need to work on Saturday, they should not be penalized for that. It's standard in the industry.
What are the hours that it is being proposed to change it to?
Well, the mayor wanted to change it to 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, and not allow Saturday at all. But with construction, especially if you're working outside, there's rain issues. If you're doing cement work and the basement fills up with water, you're not going to lay blocks in a wetsuit, So there's some issues there.
And here's the question I have, is that who does this apply to? Just people in the construction trades, or people who are also operating tractors?
No, this would be just construction.
So what are the hours of operation for people in the community of Grant who are doing farming in their fields, who are operating other heavy equipment, who are operating tractors, backhoes?
There's no ordinances whatsoever. All we have is the Freedom to Farm ordinance that says the neighbors, when they move in, if they're moving into an area where there's farming, they can't complain about and have the farmer cease and desist with his cows or pigs or chickens or whatever. If a donkey's braying, which they tend to bray a bit, they have to live with it because it's the farmers were there first. It's freedom to farm.
So my point is this, is that from a fairness standpoint, why would you change and decrease the number of hours for construction from what they currently are if folks with other heavy equipment have actually no regulations?
Well, the mayor again was grandstanding. He always is. He tries to put up this big front, create this image. He's arrogant, condescending, and disingenuous. A little later on, we're going to show you where he tells the attorney for the solar farm to sit down and shut up. But
I can't wait till that clip.
But that was pretty much the works on the hydrovac. I've put it on the agenda for next month, hydrovac moratorium. And I can't get it through their heads that hydrovac is not materials moving like you do with a dump truck. You don't send a hydrovac truck out to a gravel pit and have it suck up a bunch of gravel and deposit wet gravel. That isn't the way it works. Hydrovac trucks are sent out to clean up spills and do excavations so they don't have to use a backhoe. Then they have to deposit it where the water can run out.
Right,
and whatever is left is what you're left with.
And here's another point that I want to be clear on, is that certainly this is one company. And you know where they are dumping some of their slurry, but you don't know necessarily if they're doing other jobs where they are picking up materials and the slurry and then going and depositing it, like say if it is contaminated, and then bringing it over to some other location that allows for contaminated waste, and then they go back and they pick up something else and then they bring it back to this site. And so I think that's part of your concern as well, is that this company, we don't know that their deposits, so to speak, are limited only to this site. They may be doing other type of work in other areas where then they deposit in other dump sites that allow for the deposit of contaminated materials.
Well, I want to stress that because that's one of the problems in the guy's Facebook page. He said he has dump sites all over the place, and that's the point I made. He doesn't always go to regulated dump sites for his waste. He just says, well, hey, can I dump it here? Well, you don't know if he's slipping a toxic truckload in. Maybe he's got 7 dump sites and they come from toxic sites, and they'll dump one load in each side, and then they figure he'll average it out. The other thing is follow the money. The reason he's doing it like this, you have to pay money to dump at a dump site. It's not free. It's $100 to $200. He's done approximately 500 trucks at $100 to $200. Look at the number that has been money that's
and this is his own personal residence, so obviously he's not charging himself, I wouldn't think. I don't think his company would be charging a fee by himself. I mean, that wouldn't make much sense. I mean, maybe he does to separate his business from his personal affairs. I'm not certain, but your point's well taken in that even if there is a charge between him as an individual charging his company a fee for the use of dumping on that site.
Well, it's just money he puts in his pocket.
That's right, exactly.
The other thing I want to point out, we do have regulations on cesspool pumping and dumping. They have to dump theirs in a special place. They just can't run it out in a farmer's field. So when they pump a cesspool, so that's covered under separate ordinances. I believe it's run by Washington County. So what we're saying is, I think we should have the same type of ordinances for hydrovac trucks, because there's too much of a risk of contaminated materials.
Right, right.
But so we're going to see what happens. Next month I'll bring you an update. I can almost tell you that they're not going to accept the hydrovac moratorium. They're going to continue to saying it's fill and it doesn't need to be regulated, and we only need one manifest for one load, no matter through 500 loads came from all over. That's the difference. There's only a few places that you get clean fill from. Whereas hydrovacs, it's the other direction. You have hundreds of places you get the stuff from, and there's only a few places to dump it. Now we're going to shift gears into, Grant became a city in '95. And way back when they changed the lot size to a minimum of 5 acres with a 10-acre average. Well, now someone has come forward that there was a 20-acre lot, and the little old lady bought it, divided it. Well, when they first divided it, they had 10 acres in the back and 10 acres in the front, so there was a landlocked 10-acre parcel.
That normally wouldn't be allowed.
And well, that's exactly...
Unless you've got a road and an easement so that that landlocked
Well,
piece
that's
has
exactly it.
access.
Well, what happened in '93 is they had it switched. So instead of an east to west landlocked piece in back, it was a north, south. Each of them had 300 feet of frontage. Well, that was fine, but they made a mistake when they changed it. They didn't erase the east-west, so it made it into 4 lots because they made a mistake. Now people are coming forward and they want to sell the back 5 acres and they want to put a 700-foot driveway. And one of the things that I had said, wait a minute, why would you amplify a mistake? A mistake was made in '93. They didn't erase the lines. They applied for a 2 10-acre lot line change. We now have a minimum. You have to have acreage frontage on a road to build a house. You can't build it in the back of the middle of nowheres and go across somebody's land, even if you, well, you can if you have an easement. But that's a whole other set of problems. I finally did get them to table it till next month. But that's what we're going to be talking about in this next clip. I'm a little confused on this. It was split into 2 10-acre lots, so that was in 1993. When did the 2 5-lot, they divided the second 10-acre lot into 2 5 acres? I didn't see that, and I didn't understand that.
I'm gonna try to verbally explain it, and then if that doesn't work, we'll try an aerial and see if that might be able to do it.
Thank you.
So prior to '93, when you look at all the historical, we actually went back and looked at all the historical plat maps as well. And also within the application materials, you'll see that there were deeds that were pulled as well to try to reconstruct what happened on these parcels. So initially, there was actually a 10-acre piece that was that ran east-west essentially along Maple, and then there was a 10-acre piece that was landlocked behind it. So in '93, they actually requested a lot line rearrangement that then would add a north-south, and now essentially it created 4 quadrants. So it created a north-south line, and there was an east-west line, and you ended up with 4 5-acre parcels, essentially, is what happened in '93. So that's where the north-south parcel boundary came from.
So I can see how that happened. And then
So in other words, there was a mistake and they didn't correct it. And so because somebody made a mistake in '93, 25 years ago, I don't think, or 24 years ago, I don't think they should continue to perpetuate the mistake, is what I'm saying, when we have a 10-acre minimum and we have frontage on the road.
Right, and so the ordinance for the 10-acre minimum, what year was that enacted?
Oh, that was back in the 90s.
Okay, so before this lot line change was done in 1993.
But what they're saying is because there were lots before, like they just built a lot that was plotted in 1976, and it's the 3rd lot back on a 15-acre parcel. Well, wait a minute, it's a 1/4-mile drive, and they're supposed to have a cul-de-sac to turn around a fire engine, and basically all this is a little dirt driveway down a hill. There's no way a fire truck could get in there, but I doubt it'd get out, unless you wanted to back up.
Right.
So what I'm saying is we don't need to perpetuate mistakes, and that's what they're pushing. Of course, the realtors, they want to see more houses built. They're gung-ho. Don't look at what they say, look at what they do.
And I think that this is actually one of the underlying struggles that fuels the political issues in the city of Grant, is this struggle between trying to keep the community rural and more agricultural versus having it more developed and having greater density. And I think that that's part of that underlying struggle. Would you agree to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We've got, anytime, like the Birchwood council person told me, when they had a realtor on the board, they had all kinds of trouble. When they got rid of the realtor, everything went smoothly. And we have 2 realtors on the board, and it gives us nothing but grief. They have a different way of looking things. They twist things into a pretzel. They never shoot straight. It's always twisted and convoluted somehow. But that's that one. All we have is one clip on that. But then we're going to be talking about the solar farms, and we talked about that last time, where it went through the Planning Commission twice, in the planner that we just saw, revised it again.
The ordinance.
The ordinance for solar gardens. Then at the last minute, the last meeting, they struck community solar gardens and just said private or residential ones. The interesting fact behind that, Joyce Wiellander, her husband was on the board for 31 years before it became a city, she did not support them in the last elections. So this is a payback. They took the scheduling the ball field away from her. They tried to get the DNR. They tried to take the fire marshal away from her, but they couldn't because that's given to her by the DNR, and she's very good at what she does, and they wouldn't do it. But they do. This is retribution. She had a little tiny sign. She had someone trap gophers in a field, and there was a 2-foot by 2-foot sign for gopher trapping, and they sent her a letter that, you got to get rid of that or we're going to get a conditional use permit. I had a hay wagon in her pasture with one of my signs and Larry Lanew's signs, and the attorney sent her a letter,
And
you
those
need a
were-
conditional use permit.
And to be clear, those were campaign political signs,
Campaign political.
which do not require a conditional use permit, by
You
the
can
way.
have, any political sign is allowed until 7 or 10 days after the election. That's a state ordinance which usurps local. So anyway, this was retribution and payback. So they basically crossed out all the solar garden, and she has 60 or 80 acres, and she wanted to take a 10 or 20 acre parcel and dedicate it to that. And it would have been very unobtrusive because it would have been in the middle. It was very low to the ground. It wasn't these big panels. And they basically just sliced it all out. And that's what happened at this last meeting. I didn't put a clip of it. But here the attorney came for the solar garden, and he wanted to speak up and look at the way the mayor treated him. If we could play that clip.
Council. No, you may not, sir. Thank you. You may not. You may not. You may not. The council is in action. If you would like to ask questions, feel free to email the planner. Feel free to talk to the planner after the meeting, sir. Thank you. Go ahead.
So who was he talking to?
He was talking to the attorney for the solar garden. They provided a text amendment to say, hey, we're going to allow this, and it was perfect with screening. It was low level. And everyone else has them. They have 4 of them up in Scandia, and of course the mayor twisted that. Oh, Scandia doesn't allow it. Well, in public comment, which they don't film, and I didn't bring a camera to film at that time, he said, a man by the name Nicholson said that he has had one going in on his farm. And there's 4 or 5 of them in Scandia. So they twist this information all the time, half-truths, write out fabrications.
Right, and I know that there are many different companies that are putting together these solar gardens. And certainly even in the city of Maplewood, we've had presentations where companies have come before the city council to talk about their solar gardens that they're not putting in to Maplewood, but that they're putting into areas such as Scandia, such as other communities north of the metro, and then they're coming to cities like Maplewood to get a contract from the city of Maplewood, for instance, to then buy into purchasing the electricity that's generated from those solar gardens.
Well, I want to point out one differentiation. There's a difference between a solar farm and a solar garden. A solar garden is something like cooperative that they sell the stuff back, whereas a solar farm is a much larger. There's one on Highway 97 in Manning up in Scandia Township, and it is like on 30 or 40 acres, and it's massive. Normally, solar gardens are much smaller. They're on less than 10 acres. They're probably 300 by 500, so they're a much smaller, and they join a cooperative, and the people that buy a subscription then get a discount from XL Energy on their bill. So that's one of the differences, whereas a solar farm, they're actually just selling it directly back, and there isn't the consumer participation. So
right.
it's more like a cooperative for the solar garden, where the solar farm is more a commercial entity, where they're a commodity, a corporation selling it to XL.
And that's a good distinction to make. Good distinction.
Absolutely.
And so this next clip, then tell us about this.
Well, they're talking about the solar resolution, and see what they ended up deciding with.
For solar energy farms is in direct opposition to the recommendation of the city planner. The planning commission is nothing more than a political payback for Joyce Wiellander, not supporting the council majority.
This has
Give her a
nothing to
copy
do
of
with poor
Carl
Joyce.
Rogers.
Come on. No circus. Lauren, what do you want to do here?
And not not supporting
Enough,
Tom
enough,
Carr. This is
enough.
nothing but political
Enough.
payback.
Enough.
It meets our
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of resolution number 2017? Yep. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I will make a motion
You know, the
to
more you yell,
approve
Larry, the worse it gets.
resolution 2000.
Mayor Huber is so quick on the draw to take a vote, he forgot there wasn't a motion on the table.
Oh, yeah, someone should take the gavel away from it. It should be planted firmly in his forehead, in my opinion, but that's beside the point. He is rude, arrogant, disingenuous, condescending. It's just unbelievable. And so that's what had happened. And of course, I voted against it. They voted this down. They don't want, there's only 4 places that would meet the requirements for a solar garden, not a farm, a garden. It has to be in a county road. It has to be on 20 acres. It has to be so far from houses and things. And there's 4 places in the city of Grant that could even have this. But
And that would be able to have a solar farm?
Garden.
A solar garden, okay.
Solar farm would be pretty much out of the question, but this is just the smaller, the intermediary one. So this was retribution, basically.
Right, and again, that's why I was bringing that up, so our viewers, again, when talking about that difference between solar gardens and solar farms, you're talking about, well, there were only 4 places in the city of Grant that could actually support a solar garden.
Let's go to the enforcement procedure 540.
to put an article, but when we submit them, you've never posted them. So my question is, if you don't follow your rules and procedures, is it an enforceable document? And so I see that we're only gonna allow in this new one, the mayor to write his opinion piece and be damned the minority voice. So that's my deal on city newsletter, town hall use. Grandfathering use of town hall use is in violation of case law. Expert Lamber's attorney, Kevin, is aware of this, and I can have Kevin, if you'd like to read it, or I can, the letter from attorney Laurie Swanson. Would you like to read that? I mean, because you've had it. It said, once a city allows non-city use of public building, it cannot refuse to allow a group to use it because of the content of the speech or activity. So when you refuse to allow a special meeting,
Mr. Sederstrom, tell us, what's going on there?
That we want to use that they wanted to use the building for other than just the 2 groups. And one of the things that's coming out in this, he talks at the tail end, we don't have to watch the rest of it, but he pointed out that Huber starts banging his gavel and said, well, this isn't an action item. And Larry Lanoux pointed out, wait a minute, when you censored me at the February meeting, it wasn't an action item. You took action on it and passed a resolution. So what's really going on here? So that's, again, they bend the rules to fit whatever's working.
Right, and just to be clear, is that under the open meeting law, because this is a regularly scheduled city council meeting, it has been posted, it is the meeting of the city, it's not a special meeting, it's not an emergency meeting. So any business can be conducted at this regularly scheduled meeting, whether it's on the agenda or not, because people know the business of the city is going to be conducted. And so you're right, they were able to bring up that issue of censoring Larry Lanoux when it wasn't on the agenda. Yes, they could do that. Just like in this case,
Yeah, but the point was
just like in this case, you could bring up that issue about what Larry Lanoux was talking about. That could be talked about, and action could have been taken as well.
If they're following through, if they're consistent, but they're not consistent.
Right, that's exactly
Well,
right.
let's go to the next one if we can, and we'll talk on the other side.
For a 3-year contract and get some folks in. What I was thinking on that, and maybe some of you can preach or tell me not to preach, pardon me, can tell me how you feel about this. Like to do some interviews, get these RFPs. Maybe each of us can pick one firm, and then we'd interview these firms. Maybe get electronic RFPs to us so we can pick the firms.
So you'd have.
Yeah, and then interview the morning of the December meeting.
This is an RFP for what
Legal.
position?
For legal, they're not happy with the legal, the expenses have gone high. We're not happy with the legal because they pick and choose what they want to prosecute. If you're on their side, you get a pass. If you're not one of their allies, they sue you into oblivion. They've spent over $100,000 going after 2 citizens alone. So this is so skewed, it's not fair, and that's the problem. So that's what that was brought out. So we will be hearing from 5 attorneys. So let's go to the next one if we can, and we'll talk on the other side.
That actually names the senators, my bad.
Oh, so I'm above?
Yeah, that one,
You better go below, because there's room for me to sign.
yeah, there you go. This one names the senators, so they'll get it on their desk. Larry?
Absolutely not. This is so convoluted.
You
The
will
waste
not, you will not
transportation-
sign this?
The waste
You will
tran-
not
Listen,
sign
no,
this?
I will not. The waste
my
transfer sign at Bel Air had an underground oil storage tank, you dork. Don't you know the difference?
A waste transfer?
Apparently, they were trying to have you and Councilmember Lanou sign something to be given to the senators.
Yeah, they wanted to amend.
What was it?
They wanted to have an amendment for 1837 that does not allow a waste transfer station within 1,000 feet of a school. Well, there's a waste transfer station, but what the man does, his parents used to own the property the school's built on. What he does is he has these little roll-offs, and if someone is putting on a new roof, he'll bring them a roll-off.
So is this in the city of Grant?
It's in the city of Grant. It's right next to the school. And what he's trying to do is do some payback again. Once again, it's payback because the Johnson people didn't support him. They're on the other side of this. So every chance he lashes out.
So what you're saying then is that if this amendment to this Senate bill were to pass, it would impact that particular resident in the city of Grant?
Absolutely. It would basically make him cease and desist.
Okay, and so what type of business is that individual involved in?
Well, he's got a roll-off situation where they have these roll-off bins, and if you're having your roof done, they bring one of these big metal bins out on the back of a truck, unload it from the truck. It's got like a regular dumpster, and they put the shingles in there that they take off the roof. Then when they're done, he comes and gets it, and if it's not full, he'll bring it out to another site or whatever, and then when it's full, he takes it to the proper site to get rid of it.
So he's not actually dumping anything on his
He's
property?
just storing his containers.
I see. And so while they are selectively saying they want to put that guy out of business who is actually just storing materials and then transferring them to the proper disposal site, they will not do enforcement against somebody who is potentially doing the hydrovac and dumping of the slurry and actually depositing it in the city of Grant.
In the ground, absolutely.
I see. Well,
Okay.
that seems to be rather
Arbitrary and capricious?
absolutely.
Okay, let's go to the last one, the Washington County Watchdog, if we could, please. There was a very interesting article put on there, and I want to share that with everybody. The Washington County Watchdog, Grant Mayor Jeff Huber and Deputy Mayor Tom Carr were convicted a second time on 11/18 on campaign violations by the Minnesota Court Office of Administrative Hearings. This case involved in-kind contributions and failing to accurately file campaign reports. They received both a fine and a reprimand. Another conviction on 2/15/17 with the OAH 71-30, whatever the number is, included fines for not having proper disclosures on political signs, websites, and flyers. Both are seasoned politicians, having run for the election several times and admitted in court to having read the campaign handbook before each election. And I have it right here. The results from the Minnesota Office of Administrative Hearing, and they were fined very modestly. I also have the one that goes back in February.
And I should mention too that certainly that these orders are of public record and that they are available at the website of the Office of Administrative Hearings. So if you have an interest in that, you'd like to read them in detail, they are available to the public. But I think for our viewers, they may not realize really what in-kind contributions means. And that is the type of thing where somebody gives something to your campaign that you know about, that you know they are giving something to your campaign, and it's not money. And is something that you do as a candidate, you still need to disclose because somebody has given you something of value that is other than money that has helped your campaign. So in some cases, like say for instance, when I was a candidate, somebody might say, well, you know what, I want to help with postage, so here's a roll of stamps. So that is an in-kind contribution, them giving you a roll of stamps. So you have to designate on your disclosure form who it was and what that item was. In this case, what these three candidates did is that they donated money to another organization who also had other donations, and then there was a card of political materials,
Mailed out.
a campaign card that was mailed out to the residents of the city of Grant that was mailed out, and the candidates all testified that they knew that there was going to be something done. They didn't want this committee to have to foot the entire bill. So each of them all contributed money, and when you added up all that contribution, which they didn't disclose on their own campaign disclosures, and they didn't disclose the in-kind contribution of this whole campaign mailer done by this other organization. So that was the in-kind contribution. Plus, as it turns out, that in-kind contribution that each of the three candidates, Huber, Carr, and Kopp, received was in excess of the campaign limits for the amount of a donation that you can receive. So it was like a double whammy. So they got not only in-kind contribution, but it was in excess of the amount that is allowed under state law as a contribution limit. And so that was the main crux of that in-kind contribution.
Well, the other thing I want to point out, it's highly unusual that a sitting mayor and deputy mayor gets convicted twice, not once. We're talking twice on the same campaign with that many violations. And I think there was probably a half a dozen violations for each one totally. So it's kind of like they took the campaign manual and said, oh, how many of these rules can we break? Click, click.
Well, and I don't know that they did it quite like that, but you're right. There certainly was a disregard. And I think that the testimony certainly supports the proposition that they, other than Mr. Kopp, Huber and Carr have run many, many times. They've been in office for many, many years. And maybe there might be this feeling that, well, in the city of Grant, campaign rules really don't apply because it's a small community. Why do they apply to small communities? Because it's the same throughout the state.
Well, they could have been going for a Guinness World Book record too to see how many campaign rules they can break in one single campaign.
Believe it or not, we're at the end of our program so soon.
Time flies when you're having fun.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you for coming out here to Off the Record News, giving us an update on what's going on in the city of Grant. And we'll have you back in December so we can have a December update as well. How does that sound?
Sounds fantastic. We'll keep you up to date.
Okay, thank you. And viewers, thank you for tuning in to Off the Record News. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
As you can see, the slurry that was dumped this morning, and today's date is the 5th. This is Thursday of October. And you can see the slurry that was dumped this morning after the cease and desist letter was ordered. As you scan the area out here in this video, you can see the berms in the background. You can see the high lines. I'm going to pan over, catch the parking lot he installed, and he gravelled the parking lot so his trucks would not get stuck in here. This was not a casual deal. You can see the pit that was dug. You can see the extensive trenching that he has put in here